Recently, I had an experience with credit card fraud that caused so much unnecessary stress and anxiety. I spent hours on the phone and in chats with my credit card company. I had to get two different cards before the fraud stopped, and I was so worried about what was going to happen to my money in my bank account. And I sometimes have the fear that it's going to happen again, right? And that's why I'm so excited to introduce You Are the Healer's newest sponsor, Aura, an app for protecting online data and personal information. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access things like my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Protecting yourself and your personal information is a form of self-care. I swear. Go to my sponsor, aura.com/healer to get a 14-day free trial and have peace of mind knowing your information is safe. Again, that's Aura, AURA.com/healer for your 2-week free trial. You Are the Healer is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is mandatory because there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help. I think every person who walks this earth needs therapy, honestly. I'm stoked to be connected with BetterHelp to offer affordable and accessible therapy resources. The link is in my show notes, and you can also go to betterhelp.com/healer. That's better, HELP.com/healer. Now let's get into this episode. Hello, and welcome back to You Are the Healer. Oh my gosh, it feels so good to be back recording. I appreciate you guys being patient while I took a little break between seasons, but I am so excited to be back on the mic. Oh my gosh, that was the longest break I've ever taken from recording on the pod. And this creative outlet is so needed in my life, and I'm just so happy to be back and share about all the things I've been learning about. So this episode, we are going to be talking about insecurity. We are going to be talking about what it is, why it's harmful, and how to be less insecure, how to become more secure and confident in ourselves. Before we get started, though, I do just want to give a huge shout out to all the listeners. Thank you to anyone who supported You Are the Healer. Thank you to people who follow the Instagram, who engage on it, who engage on all the Spotify Q&As and polls, who leave a rating and review on the podcast. And ultimately, just thank you for being willing and open to listen to a healing message. This world needs so much healing. And if you're a listener of the podcast, you are helping the entire collective of humanity by being open to healing work. When you heal yourself, you heal other people. We are all connected. And so I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being a human being who is willing to heal themselves. And I'm so excited for this episode. I'm excited to be back. Let's get into it. We are in the season of the power of the dark side. So we are going to be talking about those dark topics, those dark things about ourselves, the things we don't share with a lot of people, the things that are taboo or uncomfortable or too dark to talk about. We are going to be using those topics to transform ourselves, to better ourselves, because whether you like it or not, those dark topics, those dark things about you, that's part of life. And it's not serving anyone to pretend like they don't exist. So today, when we talk about insecurity, insecurity is so often one of those things that we hide away from other people, that we don't like to talk about, that it's very vulnerable to admit when you even feel insecure. And so by talking about this, by unpacking it, we are going to take back the power of these things that are part of us that we can transform, right? If we don't talk about these dark topics, they will continue to have power over us in a negative way. But when we learn to embrace our dark side, when we learn to embrace these things that are sticky and not so great to feel and kind of negative, we can transcend them. We can move past it. We can use it to our advantage. So today we are talking about insecurity. And so what is insecurity? Thank you, ChatGPT, for a definition. Insecurity refers to a lack of confidence or certainty about oneself or one's abilities, values, or position in life. It often manifests as self-doubt, fear of rejection, or feelings of inadequacy in social, professional, or personal situations. Insecurities can stem from past experiences, comparisons with others, or internalized negative beliefs, and can impact how individuals view themselves and their relationships with others. So insecurity to me is that like that feeling of inadequacy, that feeling of I don't measure up. Insecurity deeply affects our mental health because it is tied to your self esteem. When you're feeling insecure, you have no self esteem. I think of at my most insecure, I was in middle school and like self esteem was non existent. So you don't feel worthy, okay? And that can lead to those really negative feelings of inadequacy and just not believing in yourself, right? You have this self doubt. And so that is one way that insecurity can affect our mental health, right? You have very low self esteem. Another way is insecurity can make you feel very, very anxious. You're constantly doubting yourself. You're constantly worrying how other people are perceiving you. You're worrying if you're being rejected. And that can be really, really debilitating. You can have those ruminating thoughts of worrying and just not feeling good enough. And just that's just like such a negative place to be. It's such a low vibration to be doubting your worthiness. Insecurity can also lead to social isolation. So if you don't feel good enough, if you are worried that people are judging you, if you're worried that you don't measure up, you're not likely going to put yourself in social situations because that's going to be pretty difficult if you're constantly worrying, am I good enough? Comparing yourself to other people. So you can start to isolate yourself due to that fear of rejection, that fear of embarrassment, that fear of being seen as not enough. And that can really affect your mental health. That can lead to, isolation leads to really intense loneliness. And that can also feed right into depression. Insecurity can absolutely increase feelings of sadness and hopelessness and just not feeling good enough. I mean, that is such a hard thing to believe and to feel. And insecurity can really drive depression and really, you can really go kind of off the deep end if you have insecurity that is so strong. It can really drive your life. And so that's why it's so important to talk about it because, like, these things are already dark, like, you know, and we can use insecurity and transcend it and move on from it. And we will get to that later in the episode. Another thing that insecurity can make people do, which affects your mental health, is perfectionism. If you don't feel that you're good enough, you are are likely to overcompensate because you don't want other people to pick up on the fact that you are not enough. So if you are perfect in every area, if you make everything tip top shape, if you people please, if you are perfect, then nobody will understand or nobody will know that you're inadequate or that you're insecure or that you're not good enough. And so that is a huge strategy that some people use. If I'm perfect, then no one will know, right? That perfectionism is also not sustainable because, spoiler alert, nobody's perfect. So having those perfectionistic tendencies can really lead to increased stress, burnout, just dissatisfaction. Like you're not going to give yourself credit when credit's due because you're like, I need to be perfect. So you're not going to be likely to be like, oh my gosh, great job doing this thing because you have these impossible standards. And that's just a very unsustainable mindset to have that insecurity can lead us towards. Insecurity, I feel like really, really shows up also in relationships. Okay. So it's no secret that when you're in relationships, you're more likely to be triggered, right? And so when you're with someone romantically, as a close friend, when you have a close connection with someone, your insecurities might come out and they might really sabotage a relationship if you're feeling very insecure and you need a ton of reassurance or you're constantly anxious. You're worried that your partner's cheating on you. You worried that all your friends are hanging out without you behind your back. You're, super sensitive to rejection and plans being canceled and things like that. That can really affect your life because you don't feel like you're deserving of love. And so you're going to constantly seek that reassurance, that validation. And that can really be harmful in relationships. And if we move past insecurity, then we don't feel that, how relationships are just like highs and lows. You won't feel that intense of a low in a relationship if you have that inner security. And so insecurity can really contribute to the like roller coaster of highs and lows in relationships because you don't feel good enough and you need this person to make you feel good enough and nobody can do that for you. And so it's a inherently flawed plan. I've tried it plenty of times. No one can heal your insecurity for you. In relationships, more often than not, bring your insecurities to the front. a relationship will not make them go away. It will magnify them. And so it's up to you when you get into relationship with anybody, with family, friends, partners, insecurities will come up. And it's kind of like, I think of relationships as like a mirror. They show you parts of yourself, and it's like, okay, now that you see this insecurity, what are you going to do about it? And when we have intentionality and awareness of our insecurities and we want to move past them, relationships can be kind of like a shortcut to healing. Relationships can show us parts of ourselves that might lay more under the surface. And when you're not with people in a close way, you're completely unaware of those insecurities. And so increasing your connection with other people can have some things come to the surface. And that is okay. And that's normal in any relationship, is you will learn things about yourself. That's like a guarantee. And so we can use the information that you learn about yourself through relationships to heal yourself, to uncover some of those wounds that you're insecure about, and then heal from them internally with yourself. So then your relationships can be healthier, happier, and less clingy, less needy, less, I need you to reassure me, and more, I don't know, like it's not a transaction. Like, I just enjoy being with you. Insecurity also leads to pretty negative thought patterns. You know, those thoughts of insecurity are, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, everyone hates me, everyone's going to leave me, right? Those are really intense negative thoughts. And if insecurity goes on its rampage, and we don't do what we need to do to kind of stop it from running its course, that can tank our mental health. I mean, it is easy to suffer when you have insecurity in your life. And so that's another reason why it's so important to talk about, is because maybe you're feeling these symptoms of depression or anxiety because you're insecure. And if we heal these parts, then those symptoms will decrease, right? So negative thought patterns can rule your entire life. I actually have an entire episode about how your thoughts create your reality. It's on neuroplasticity if you want to learn more about that. But changing your thought patterns will change your life. And a lot of insecurity is those really, really negative thought patterns that we want to move away from. And so the last way that insecurity can affect your mental health that I want to talk about is insecurity can make it really hard to cope. Because if you don't feel worthy of love, if you feel like a burden, if you don't feel good enough, those are really intense emotions, right? And we're all human, we're all doing our best. Those are hard things to cope with, those beliefs and those thoughts about yourself. So if you're insecure, you're more likely to have a hard time coping and using coping skills when things get hard. You might not feel worthy of being good to yourself, and so you're going to do coping skills that are likely going to be harmful. So, and this is more on the extreme end of insecurity, but this is where insecurity can lead if it's kind of runs its course, if there's nothing in place to stop it. And so I think of when I was my most insecure, I was very depressed. I had no self-esteem. I was in middle school, and I did not know how to feel better. I just knew that I didn't want to feel the way that I was feeling. I didn't want to feel like a burden. I didn't want to feel inadequate. I didn't want to feel not worthy of love. And so I had really maladaptive coping skills. I developed eating disorder. I self-harmed because these intense negative thoughts and this isolation that the insecurity led me to was so unbearable that I was willing to do anything to like take the edge off of that suffering, of that pain. And so insecurity is such a prevalent topic when it comes to our mental health, because it's really intense, it's really uncomfortable, it's painful, and those feelings and that situation can lead you to be unsafe in your mental health. And so let's talk about, how do we heal from insecurity? How do we go from being insecure to moving into a state of inner security, of confidence, of feeling good enough no matter what your external circumstances are? Because sure, there are things that can help with insecurity on a surface level, but at the end of the day, you are the only person who can heal your insecurities. You are the only person who can feel good enough for yourself. You can have 100 people telling you, you are loved, you matter, you are enough. But if you don't believe it, if you don't do that inner work, it is not going to be effective. Okay, I have tried, listen, in relationships, I have tried so hard to have the perfect partner, to have the perfect person validate me enough to where I'm not insecure. Okay, it doesn't work, it's not sustainable. People are human and people will slip up. And if you are relying on something external, right? My example is relationships because that's what my experience is. But if you're relying on something external, this could be social media. If you're relying on a certain amount of Instagram likes to feel good about yourself, it is not sustainable. And you are putting something so valuable, your sense of self, your sense of being good enough, your sense, like your internal beliefs, you're putting that in something that isn't reliable, that can change. And so in this episode, we're going to unpack how to become secure inside of yourself, how to move away from insecurity and be this confident, empowered, high vibrations person that isn't letting insecurity run their life. So how do we overcome insecurity? I want to start by saying I'm very much learning this actively right now, which is actually why I picked this as a podcast episode, because insecurity was rearing its ugly head in my life and I wanted to learn about it. Okay, so I want to say that I am coming from a place of actively fighting insecurity and not, I'm on the other side, I'm on my throne, here's what I did. No, okay, we're learning together. So, how do you overcome insecurity? Well, the first step is figuring out what your insecurities are. And so this takes some intentional reflecting and journaling and kind of uncovering your past to see, okay, what am I insecure about? What are some of these beliefs that I have? And you can access those beliefs and thoughts any number of ways. Obviously, I'm going to recommend therapy. Therapy is a very great way to become aware of where certain things came up in your life, where you learned this belief about yourself, where your self-esteem tanked, things like that. Therapy can give you a great toolkit to uncover yourself and reflect on some of those things. But we also are smart, capable human beings who can do a lot of things on our own too. So you can reflect on your insecurities by taking time to journal and writing out, what are some things I'm insecure about? What are some things I'm sensitive to? Even meditating, you can meditate on where your insecurities are coming from. And then what I want you to do is make a list of all of your insecurities, of all of your limiting beliefs. So that way you kind of know what you're working with and you can know where to focus your energy. And then when you reflect on your insecurities, you can also take time to learn where they came from. So I remember, I think I saw this TikTok. I'm not exactly sure where I got this message. I think it was TikTok. And it talked about feeling insecure about your body. And it was like, I want you to look in the mirror and said, who told you that this wasn't beautiful? And I just love that message so much because a lot of the insecurities, at least in my own personal experience, they weren't my own thoughts. Like, I wasn't the one to say, oh, I'm fat. Somebody else told that to me, and I put weight into that opinion, right? But like, who told you this wasn't beautiful? Was it you? Were you the originator of your insecurities? Because if not, then you can choose to not place value into those experiences that might have shaped your insecurities and your beliefs. So when you reflect on insecurities, you'll uncover these past experiences that may have led you to develop this feeling of insecurity. Or maybe these negative experiences, or maybe you compare yourself with other people. Insecurities can pop up from a whole number of places. Maybe you made assumptions about someone and none of it was true. No one even believes that it's true, but that's something that your brain made a belief about at a young age, right? And so we're going to uncover our insecurities. We're going to reflect on them, write them down, make a list. And then also acknowledging your triggers can be a really big one because, we're adults. We're going to go through life and you're going to get triggered and insecurity is going to come up. And so we can use that information to our advantage by being mindful with it and being intentional with it and writing down all the things that trigger you, because then when you experience a trigger, you can have that awareness going into the next situation of, okay, so for me, a huge thing, I get triggered on this so bad. I've been working on it for years. It happened originally in friendships. It's really bad for me in romantic relationships. If plans get canceled, I feel so insecure, like almost debilitatingly insecure, because my first thought is I'm a loser. They're canceling me because I'm a loser, which is such a mean thought. Like, holy shit. Um, and so it's helpful to know your triggers, because when it happens, you can give yourself more compassion. You can give yourself more grace, because you're like, this is something that really gets me activated. And then it's also just helpful to know your triggers, because it's helpful to know in general. It's good information to have for yourself. So that way you can be intentional with them and put some extra attention and effort into your triggers, so that they don't have this grasp on your life, that they don't tank your mental health in the same way that they used to. Like, we can use our triggers to learn and grow and better ourselves. So you make a list of all your insecurities, and you make a list of all of your triggers. That's the first way to transcend insecurity. On our healing journey, this is something that's really helped me, is we will face these triggers over and over again. Like, you are not immune from being triggered. You cannot guarantee yourself a life where you don't have hard experiences, you don't have challenges. Like, that is just inevitable, unfortunately. And so I know sometimes if I have like an old trigger that keeps coming up, or an insecurity that I've actively worked on for years, and it comes back up, it can be really easy to be like, oh my gosh, I've made no progress with this. Like, I'm still struggling with this thing. But this analogy has helped me quite a lot. It's kind of like a visual. It's called spiraling higher. So it's like a corkscrew, and on one side of the corkscrew, that's your trigger. That's the thing you're working on. That's the thing you're sensitive about. And so when you're first starting your healing journey, you're going to hit that trigger from a lower point in the corkscrew. Just follow the analogy. And it's going to be intense, and it's going to be a lot. And you're going to learn from it. And you're going to continue to spiral up a little bit higher. And then inevitably, you're going to circle back to that same wound, that same insecurity, that same trigger. But you're going to come at it from a space where you've learned that much more because of your last experience. So now when you face this thing, you're going to have a little bit of growth and tools and things learned. So that way, when you experience it again, you're like, okay, I know what this is. I'm going to apply what I learned last time. And then you're going to grow from that experience. And then you're going to go back up to another state where you've learned that much more about insecurity or about whatever the thing is. And each time you relearn the lesson, or you are faced with the same pattern, or you have the same thing coming up, you have that much more knowledge about yourself, about life, about how to handle it. And so it can be discouraging when you are dealing with the same thing over and over again. In my own life, and I talk about this a little bit in the episode on attachments, but something that has come up over and over again for me is a fear of abandonment. That is like a very intense insecurity of mine that can get really ugly and really intense and not great. So I found myself at times being really frustrated with like, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this again. And I remember listening to this meditation one time that said, it was about abandonment, and said, you will be abandoned in the future. I was like, what do you mean? Because whenever I'm faced with abandonment, I like have all these personal narratives. I'm like, oh, it has to be me. I'm flawed in some way. And it was saying like, abandonment is inevitable. You will be triggered into that feeling again. And it's like, what are you going to do this time? The next time you feel abandonment, how are you going to treat yourself? How are you going to talk to yourself? Because you know it's not personal. These insecurities and these triggers and all of these things, like that is just life, okay? And it's how do we take what life gives us and handle it in a way that's helpful for us. So another part of insecurity that we talked about is that negative self-talk that can really, really, really tank your mental health. And so a way to overcome insecurity is by challenging that self-talk. So the first thing you need is you need awareness of these negative self-talk, this negative beliefs, things like that. So awareness will get us to challenging the negative self-talk. And so we talk about this at work, where we have, they're called thinking traps or cognitive distortions or negative self-talk, insecurity, whatever you want to call it. And I like to think about it as like those negative self-talks is like digging yourself into a hole. And the hole is like your mental health, right? So the lower your negative self-talk goes, the deeper the hole gets, and the worse your mental health is, the more severe your depression is, your anxiety, your insecurity. So negative self-talks digs us into a hole. And challenging the negative self-talks is like building a ladder out of the hole. So even just asking yourself, if you feel really insecure and you say, oh my God, nobody likes me, challenging your negative self-talk looks like asking yourself, is that true? Is that absolutely true that nobody likes me? And it's just opening up your mind to that curiosity of like, maybe this really intense polarizing thought isn't as true as I think it is. Human beings love to put things in boxes and categories and see things really black and white when a lot of life is gray area. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough, asking yourself a question and challenging that self-talk just opens the door to being like, maybe the situation isn't 0 to 100. Maybe there's some gray area in it. And so challenging your self-talk is just asking yourself, we call them at work detective questioning, right? Can this be true? Is there evidence for this thought? Do other people believe this thought to be true? So it's building a ladder out of the hole that your negative self-talk has dug you into. So challenging your negative self-talk, challenging your insecurities, your limiting beliefs, your doubts, your fears, all of that stuff can help overcome insecurity. And then the next step is, once you've kind of built a little bit of a ladder out of the hole, if we're following this analogy, let's say like your positive mental health is like building a building outside of the ground, right? So if you're doing really well, you're on top of this nice castle. If you're doing really low or poor, you're in the dirt beneath the castle. Okay, just follow the analogy. So a way to go from out of the hole into the castle is by reframing and replacing this negative self-talk. And so instead of saying, nobody likes me, you can reframe it by saying, I have great connections in my life. Or you can say, I'm learning and improving every day. Whatever your thought is, you can choose a different one and reframe it and give your attention to that new thought. So that way, that thought that you're choosing, that you're reframing to that helpful thought, will get you to the top of the castle. Whereas if you let these negative thoughts that are likely not true at all run the show, then you're going to be underground. Okay. I like that analogy. I feel like that was a good little visual. Okay. So challenging negative self-talk and reframing and choosing better beliefs is a great way to overcome insecurity. The next tip I have for overcoming insecurity is making a list on all of the things you love about yourself. Making a list about all of your strengths, all of those things that you are innately good at. And then that way, when you're feeling insecure, you can always revisit the list to remind yourself of how lovely and how special and how awesome you are. So I have something like this in my phone. I started it originally actually with other people. It was a list that I titled Random Things I Love About People. And I would name people in my life and random little things that I loved about them. And then I was like, wait a minute, I can add myself to this list. So that's actually now the first person on this list, is a list of myself and all of the things that I love about myself. And if you are a little adverse to self-love and things like that, you can be like, Sydney, this is the worst idea of all time. It's okay to think that. You can revisit it whenever you're ready. This is all just suggestions. Do what your little heart desires. And also with this message and every message, take what resonates and leave the rest, okay? Maybe you're not in a space where that's going to be helpful. Everybody's different. Sending you love and support. Something that really helped me was making a list of all of the things I love about myself, because there's so many things, and it's like, as you're going about your life, you can add to this list whenever you think of something that pops into your mind. And so on a bad day, you can read it and be like, okay, wait, I'm not the worst person alive. I have really good qualities. I have these strengths. And it can just remind yourself of how lovely you are. And sometimes our brain forgets that, and it's nice to have something to fall back on whenever we do forget that. And then another part of focusing on the things you love about yourself, focusing on your strengths, is celebrating yourself. And this is something that I wish people did more often. I feel like if you celebrate yourself in society, it's like, oh my gosh, they're so egotistical, they're so cocky, whatever. Celebrating yourself goes a really long way, especially on all of this healing work. Okay, celebrating yourself. I remember the first time I had an automatically positive thought. It was this year, okay? At least the first time I was like aware of it. I was in the shower. I don't even remember what the positive thought was. But I was like, oh my gosh, Sydney. And I celebrated myself. I was like, Oh my gosh, like you had an automatic positive thought. Like that is so cool. I am so proud of you. And celebrating yourself, even for those tiny little things, okay? Having one automatic positive thought in the grand scheme of my entire life is a very minor thing. Celebrating yourself allows you to feel good about yourself, and it makes you feel less insecure because you're like, wait, I'm doing this. I'm proud of myself. Look at what I've accomplished. And when you celebrate yourself, you feel better about yourself. Okay. So I know that society can be weird about celebrating yourself, but even for all of the little things, positive praise, celebrating anything goes a very long way and can make you feel a lot better about yourself. So that is another tool I have for overcoming insecurity. Another one, which I've talked about before, the theme of comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. Everyone is lovely in their own ways, and comparing yourself to somebody else diminishes both of you. Avoid comparison as best as you can. And I say that also battling comparison. So I'm right there with you, babe. A way that I avoid comparison, which I honestly would like to do more of, is social media and just getting off it. Limiting social media can help you feel better about yourself because you're not doing that highlight reel to yourself comparison, right? Like no one shares their deep insecurities on Instagram. It's all of the fun highlights of everything, right? And so you're comparing someone's glamorized moments of their life that they're choosing to share with your deep inner knowing that might not be great. It might be dark. It might be messy. It might be not so lovely to think about. And you're comparing that version of you to this superficial, pasted, put together version of somebody else, which is not a fair comparison. And it likely leads you to feel worse about yourself. So a big way to avoid comparison is to get off social media, and really just redirect your thoughts back to your own journey. If you are thinking, oh my gosh, this person is in grad school and I'm not in grad school, like, am I behind? Don't give that thought any more time, energy, attention. Focus and redirect your thoughts back to yourself. Everyone is unique, everyone has a different path, and you are doing yourself and others a disservice if you expect everyone to be the same. Yes, it's easy as humans to fall into the trap of comparison. It is. I have done it so many times, and that's why I don't like social media, is because every time I fall for it. I fall for the comparison trap. Focus on your own journey. Your journey is yours for a reason. Okay? There are dreams in your heart that are not on other people's hearts. You have strengths that other people don't innately have. You were gifted this like perfect creation craft of you for a reason, for your journey, not for other people's journeys, for your journey. So anytime you find yourself feeling insecure, inadequate, redirect it back to yourself and say, this is my journey. It's okay if it doesn't look like everybody else's. Another thing that can largely contribute to insecurity is the people that you are surrounding yourself with. So in researching for this podcast episode, I was reminded of when I was 18, 19, I was dating a narcissist, learned quite a lot about myself, felt very deeply, deeply, deeply insecure because the people in my life, specifically the person I was dating at the time, contributed greatly to my feelings of insecurity. And so a way to learn from insecurity and to move past it is to be intentional about the people you surround yourself with. Your energy is precious, and the people you are around, whether you know it or not, affect you. And so if you are spending your time with people who are draining you, who are feeding you these beliefs of you're not good enough, which was very much my experience dating this person, was, constant put downs, constant, oh, if only you changed this about yourself, then you'd be that much prettier. I mean, the things that this person said to me, jail, jail. I don't even want to focus on it because we're overcoming insecurity. But I just want to share that to say that the people you surround yourself with can contribute to insecurity or can uplift you and support you and be a positive influence in your life. Like I think about the people in my life now, when I tell them that I'm insecure, when I'm tell them I'm having a bad day, I mean, they pour into me, they reassure me, they validate me, and it helps. The people you surround yourself with have such power to help or to hurt. And so it is very important to be intentional about the people you surround yourself with. This is something I've learned throughout the years of not everyone deserves your time and energy. And that I'm not saying that from a place of anyone's better than anyone. I'm saying it from a place of I love and care about myself. And if being around certain people, certain places, certain things is harmful to me, I love myself enough to remove myself from that situation. Okay. Not everyone deserves to spend time with you. Your energy, your light, your soul, your time, your attention is valuable. And so it is very important to surround yourself with people who motivate you, who encourage you, who lift you up, who pour into you, because you'll have times when your mental health is not doing good. You'll have times when you're feeling insecure, and the people in your life can help you through that. And that brings me to the next point of being vulnerable helps when it comes to insecurity, because there can be so much shame around insecurity if you don't talk about it. If this is like your deep dark secret that you are not sharing with other people, right? I have a whole list of beliefs that sound ridiculous when I say them out loud, but saying them out loud to somebody else and taking that risk and letting somebody in means that that insecurity does not have the same power over you that it does when you keep it to yourself, when you hide it away, when you pretend it doesn't exist. When you do that, first of all, shame is going to rear its ugly head. You have this secret that you're not sharing with people, and that shame is going to make you feel like I'm not a good person, which is going to contribute even more to feelings of insecurity. So when you share anything that you're shameful about, even just a little bit, it is going to take that weight off of you mentally. You are going to feel that much better, even if it's just 1%. 1% is better than nothing, right? And so being vulnerable, and this comes from surrounding yourself with people that you can trust, that you know support you, that are going to be positive, because the last thing you want to do is be vulnerable with someone who is going to use that against you because they're a person that you've identified as harmful, right? So that's why it's so important to be picky about who you share and are vulnerable with. But when you take that leap, when you let somebody into these dark parts of you, you are I'm like, I know what I want to say, but the words are hard right now. Like, you are not giving that thing power over you anymore. When you share with people your insecurities aren't going to rule your life because you're not weighed down by shame. Shame just makes you feel that you're not good enough, that there's something wrong with you. And when you open up and you let somebody in, you realize, wait a minute, this person has the same thought as me. That is so helpful for me when I'm vulnerable and I share and someone's like, I had that thought yesterday. I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm not, one in a million types of messed up, right? It helps so much when you're vulnerable and share your experience with other people. It helps you feel less alone. It helps you feel less isolated and messed up and whatever your brain is telling you. When you open up with people, you'll learn that those insecurities that are running your brain, people don't think about you. You might think them about yourself, but other people don't think that about you. And that can be a really powerful thing to learn. And the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to overcoming insecurity is self-compassion. Okay? Be nice to yourself, please. Life is too short to not be your own best friend. Okay? Life is a lot more intolerable when you are bullying yourself inside your head. Okay? So when we transcend insecurity, we go from being our own self-bully in our head, thinking these really negative beliefs, thoughts that are just weighing us down. We can change that relationship with ourselves through self-compassion, by being nice to ourselves, by talking to ourselves like we would a friend, for forgiving ourselves, for encouraging ourselves, for hyping ourselves up. Like, you have the power to make that the relationship with yourself. You can change the relationship with yourself from bully to bestie. Okay. I did it. It's taken years, right? So I just want to reiterate, with all of these things, with all this healing work, be patient with yourself. Okay. Things take time, especially unlearning beliefs that you likely learned at a really young age. So give yourself grace, give yourself compassion. If it's taking you a while to unlearn something that you've thought your entire life, that is normal and that is okay. And give yourself that grace and compassion on this journey. You're doing your best. And I just really want to reiterate that, like, I sound so corny every time I say this, but you are the healer. You are the person who can take care of you better than anybody else. And a big part of dealing with these heavy things, dealing with this dark stuff, is being compassionate to yourself and giving yourself grace and time and love as you navigate through things that are really hard. because if you don't give yourself self-compassion, it makes the journey that much more difficult. The journey is already difficult, okay? When it comes to mental health stuff, okay? It's already kind of hard or very hard. It depends on your, symptoms and all that stuff. But you have the power to be kind to yourself, to talk to yourself like you would a friend, to be gentle with yourself and to nurture yourself. And you know yourself better than anybody else will. So you know how to give love in the way that you want to receive it. So thank you so much for listening to this episode as we talked about one of the dark topics of insecurity. We talked about what is insecurity, why and how it shows up in our mental health, how it can lead to anxiety, depression, negative self-talk, bad coping skills, okay? Insecurity can run the show if you let it. And then later in this episode, we talked about all the ways you can overcome insecurity. We talked about reflecting on where they came from, figuring out what our insecurities are, what our triggers are, and then also focusing on what our strengths are, what we love about ourselves. We talked about avoiding comparison, getting off social media. We talked about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who support you and uplift you. We talked about vulnerability and how that can help you transcend insecurity. And lastly, we wrapped up with being self-compassionate, which is so important for so many things on this healing journey. So thank you so much. I want you to take a second to thank yourself for listening to this, because this isn't a fun topic. This isn't like, oh my God, I'm just going to learn about insecurity. It's like, okay, things might come up and that's difficult. So go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself a little hug, whatever you need to do to thank yourself for showing up. Okay, that is self-compassion right there. So thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for being a fan of You Are the Healer, for listening to the message. I'm so glad to be back. And until next time, may you be well.